Well, I'll start by saying it's good to have you home. While I'm not doing a welcome to country, that lies with only Edna, who can't be with us today. So yeah, it's really exciting not too loud. I should check that, shouldn't I? Am I talking too loud? No, great. So it's really good to have you. I'm quite spoilt at Mum. I think I'm saying it's really good to have you here and to share the space with. Get to hog it all by myself, isn't it? But you're here now. So it's really nice to have you.
And the other mob here too?
Yeah,
you have to share it 4 times over now.
Yeah. So got to remember we're not the only ones, isn't it? So it's good to be back home, although you're only home on the nation, Wiradjuri, not with your own mob, the clan at Cowra.
Yeah, well, there's a few here from there.
Yeah, well, I've come to make you feel at home. But would you like to talk a little bit about Cowra, like Uncle Ron? Can we talk about Uncle
Ron? Well, you had a long yarn with him. This is my mum's brother. He's the kind of keeper of the kind of family history. He's got 9 big volumes, and hasn't been very well lately, but yeah, he's doing okay.
We had him pepped up, didn't we? He was very excited,
You were bossing him around.
He was trying to relate us, wasn't he? He did a very good job. So
yes, he did a very good job.
We've kind of agreed. I was saying to Uncle I was trying to be related so that I could boss Brook around a little bit more today. So Uncle does say we're probably related in 20 kind of different ways. So there we go.
20 bosses.
20 times bossing. Yeah. So the important
Too much bossing.
Yeah, the important thing, talking to Brook earlier when he asked to have a talk with me, well, I did tell him I do have a life and I don't have time to read up about him, on all the work he's done, all the exhibitions, all the awards he's won, I'm a bit jealous. So why would I rub salt into the wound reading all that stuff, hey?
But you were doing that at 2 a.m?
Oh, I've been reading about you since I had the invitation. Yeah, my Brook life. You've taken over my life somewhat. But I did say to you this morning.
Yes,
I've been reading about you as early as 2 o'clock this morning. But we won't be talking about that. I'm just reading to appreciate. I think jealousy.
It's cultural.
Yeah. So an early conversation, Brook did say I just said, look, he's going to have to be prepared to share the limelight with me, and he said I could have it all. Now, wasn't that a mistake?
Yeah, I'm going to go now.
But anyway, I'm not going to take it all, but I'm certainly going to try and make me look good when I mention him. Absolutely, why wouldn't I? So let's kind of look at, I just wanted to say, the important thing, when you were born, Brook, I was in grade 2. So what does that tell you? When we think about age.
You're 6 years older than me.
Yes, so that means you have to do as I say kind of thing,
yes,
isn't
Auntie
it?
Kaz.
Yeah, that's important to have, isn't it?
You sure already took my soy milk?
So what's really interesting in, I dabbled in materials for about 20 years, just really dabbling. I still do dabble in them. And by the time I finished these 20 years of dabbling in material, what's astounding is this young lad starts to, around 2000 I start to exhibit, but we have to go back a little bit for the work that this young lad has already done. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about how arty you were. I mean, I know you have lots of people helping do things. I'm wondering how artistic you really are. So I've got to know, because I'm a...
Well, I didn't paint this.
That's what I'm getting to. So
I saw you in here painting.
It was my eyes shut.
You've got a bit of red in your hair still.
Yeah.
How arty.
But tell us, have you got this artistic streak in you before you do a course of art study after school?
After school or before?
No, during school, before you go and do a course of study.
Well, my grandfather taught me how to do drawing, stick figures.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, good.
Little pigs.
Were you good at
little
it?
Stick figures. I'm the eldest grandson, so there's 36 of us, grandkids. And Mum's the eldest of 7. And my grandfather, his family are Bells from Ngunnawal. Yass area. But he died very young, 54, smoking those Marlboro cigarettes. So half of the grandkids didn't get to meet him, of course. But, he instilled very much a kind of a sense of... sure, stick figures, people go, okay, big deal, stick figures, but it's actually it was just different and important, and he used to pull his own teeth out. He didn't trust, dentists or anything.
Understandable.
Had a jar of teeth. Nan would cut our hair. So it was a very, if we're talking about really creatively, what kind of sustained us was really things at home. And also the carvings, like the little Aboriginal head carvings and the spoons. And so as far as connecting to culture and creativity, it was very much within the family. I didn't go to an art gallery until I was in Year 12, or didn't really know that. My art teacher took me, even though I made it to Year 12, which I think, what does that mean anyway? Made it to Year 12. I mean, I think that art sustained me. But I'm a drawer originally, so I used to do family portraits, like kind of realistic portraits. So I suppose that thing from my grandfather introduced me to the line or the mark. And so that was really
Which is still
important.
there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So what gets you to go and do an art course?
Well, I did 4 other courses before that.
Wow.
So I went to study marine biology in Rockhampton. Don't ask me why. I thought I'm getting away from the western suburbs, which is really homophobic. I mean, for blackfellas it was fine because big famous footballers, but of course there was racism and that still. But I just thought I'd get away from all of that, and of course land myself in Rockhampton, one of the most homophobic, racist places. There's many of them in Australia, but I studied marine biology and left after 6 months. Came back and did... What did I do? I worked, in a hotel for a while.
Yeah, okay.
Setting up banquet tables and sets, just young. And then I'd studied chemistry for 6 months. I don't know how I got into that. But I'm dyslexic, so it was this kind of really kind of relationship with colour and form. And then I started interior design, and then I did a bridging course at Yumbunna at UTS, and then I did art. Oh. So it was kind of really a bit of a meandering. I think that, it was just about the multiplicity of what that is.
Experience, isn't it? And finding your way, having a go.
Yeah, I wasn't attached to, Mum, when I first was going to say I was doing marine biology, I don't know why, I'm scared of sharks, but it was more like I love animals. It was more about escaping and going somewhere else. Mum said, oh, don't worry, you'll be back doing art. Where my other friends, their parents, because I hung out a lot with, all my friends were from the Middle East. And they all, and all their family thought I was Lebanese. And so, all us wogs were hanging out together. They were kind of in the 80s and 90s. And it was great.
Yeah.
Used to get really great food from all the different mums. Yeah. But, Mum and Dad said, oh, you'll be back doing art again. I went, no, I won't.
So your parents knew better?
Yeah, but I suppose what I was saying, about my mates is that all their, families were pressuring them to do, computer science and really under quite a lot of pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't think of maybe much of the arts back then, did we?
Yeah, but I think also for new migrants too, it was very much about getting in, doing very different things. Well, my experience anyway of my best mates. Yeah.
So all those courses you do, you kind of wind up into your first exhibition, roughly, 93? We're talking about the black velvet work on black velvet, white words?
Yes.
First exhibition,
yes.
Did you say?
Yeah.
I'd like to share first time
I used Wiradjuri as well.
Okay, yes. And why the velvet? Why that material?
Oh, yes.
Back in that day?
Yeah.
It was around. I was talking to you about how my uncle doing beautiful artwork, painting on velvet, astounding.
Oh yes, your uncle was doing that.
Striking. Yeah, Uncle Harry. So why that material back then?
Well, because of the stories in my family about the treatment of women, and I come from a big matriarchal family, so it was really important for me to kind of comment on that. But also my experience of racism, even as a fair-skinned Aboriginal person, it's so embedded within Australian culture. I mean, like when we were in Rockhampton, my girlfriend at the time, she was Aboriginal from Blackall, and we were walking down the road, and someone from our university class came up and said, "Oh, do you know the reason why we call you bungs?" And then, of course, told us the story. And you hear it in pubs, or you're calling cabs for your cousins or whatever who are darker skin, or we all kind of live with all of this.
We're still doing that.
Yes,
we're still calling cabs for our dark skin.
Yeah, but I suppose to kind of link it to those early 90s for me making that work. So yeah, the black velvet work. It's a big kind of black velvet, and it's got the word coon across it. And then the other one is white velvet, and it's got white words, but a circle, these vinyl letters. And then I did this really big text piece, because when you went to art school, you were doing all this kind of conceptual work, and it was like the 90s where the big kind of all these big concepts were coming out of Europe and the United States about how to talk in language, like art speak.
Okay.
Like the problematic impurity of a text to blah 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 blah. And so I did that, and I put Naragayambu Bangugagara underneath, which is like it's a crazy lie all over the place. And so that's kind of when I first started to play with language and push back.
Interesting.
And I was still using it.
Yeah, so you took up language pretty early, isn't it? Straight off the rank.
Yeah, we grew up with language, not a lot, not as much as that, but definitely basic things. And Lorna and I, we were all talking about it yesterday, right? And we grew up with Gil and Jilawar and things like that, but not to the extent in which I've learnt it with family and friends. Yeah.
And sadly, we weren't brought up with language, but I was talking about how my brother, who would go off with cousins who visited, and he would come home with language, talk about things like, I'm off to the Gilla, and we're like, where are you going? You think he's going on an outing, but it turns out he's just going to the toilet. So, yeah, we weren't serious enough, and we could have learnt a lot of language just through him. And we had Pop would come and stay with us, but he wouldn't let us learn the language. So that's all interesting, as in who are you going to speak it to anyway?
Mm.
Yeah, so by the time 2000 comes around, I'm just deciding I'm going to go and do a bit of exhibiting, and you have done an astounding amount of work already. And so by the time I start to exhibit locally, you've gone overseas. You're now exhibiting internationally. It's really showing off, wasn't it, that time?
It's not my fault.
No.
I blame Hetty and Brenda from Bumali.
Okay.
So they were doing amazing shows internationally and locally, and they were a really big support. And of course, artists before that in Bumali were so extraordinary and still are.
Were they just starting out, Bumali?
Yeah, they all started in, I think, the very late 80s, I think. And then Ree and I, and people like Julie Goff and that, but Ree and I were working at Bumali in 95, 94, 95. Until I worked in Jumbunna at UTS after my course. I then ended up working there. But we were really close then. I mean, we're still good mates. But and there was Romaine Morton, who we were talking about as well, who was really, really a big influence even back then. But I suppose coming back to that, I mean, my first Australia Council grants was in 96, and I was 26. It was pretty
You're 26.
Young, yeah, and that's when I went to the Royal Albert Memorial Museum in Exeter to do an installation. I know that Destiny and Brenda and Ree, I think, were also part of that, and Michael Riley, and that was a really big eye-opener for me because it was the first time I went overseas, first time I went to a museum. So DIWIL, the name for this show, is about collection or collecting things, and so that was the first time that I really, I knew about the Aboriginal human remains trade, but it was the first time that I came face to face with it, because the anthropologist said that back then, even, which was quite extraordinary for British museums, that a lot of the stuff was returned, but there was one object that wasn't, or one...
They wouldn't return it?
They were. Yeah, so they were really, I mean, compared to the British Museum and the Duckworth and in Cambridge, who refused to... but I was very lucky to kind of have really strong peers and mentors And I think that we're lucky in this world, like all of us here, like we have people we can kind of rely on and that are there, and we come apart
family.
and we come back together, and
But even
we have
Bamali,
different
isn't it?
ideas sometimes about things. Yeah.
Yeah, and having Bamali start up just after you've come out of your first exhibition is pretty extraordinary, isn't it, for the other First Nation artists you got to mix with, work with.
I mean, it was good for Sydney Mob, but also good for others like Julie coming, and Gordon Bennett also was showing there, and of course others were involved. Like
all the names we know now, but it was astounding what was going on back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2006 was a really good year for us. We were in an exhibition together called Landmarks at the National Gallery Victoria. Not that I really remember much of that, but the main thing I want to highlight that we were guest speakers at a symposium, Brook and I, and I don't know why. Maybe I'd just gone to the toilet, and when I was coming on my way back, Brook was leaving because he wasn't feeling well, and he thought he
I think I had a sore back.
Yeah, he had a sore back. He was leaving, so we bumped into each other, and I remembered his face. I didn't remember him. Isn't that terrible? Shocking. But importantly, he remembered me. Wasn't that good? So he introduced himself and said who he was, and it didn't mean anything. Brook Andrew didn't mean anything, you know. And then it's quite funny, isn't it? And he said, "Oh, you know, I'm Brook Andrew." And the most important thing he said was that he loves my work. Now, isn't that great, eh? So that's a catchphrase I use all the time. People say, "Brook Andrew," I said, "Don't worry, he loves my work." So it's pretty exciting, an old girl like me meeting all these young fellas and they're all loving my work. Yeah, I'm not suffering too much. It's great stuff, isn't it? Yeah. Let's kind of go to, what do we say, 2010. 2010 was another great year.
You're making me feel old.
Yeah, how do you think I feel? Right. So 2010 we were in the Sydney Biennale together.
Yes.
You remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was great. Would you talk about your neon? No, that was Landmarks, wasn't it? I did want you to talk about that work, actually. 2006, before I jump to that. Would you talk about your neon work in 2006?
Oh, the polemics work. Yeah.
Talk about that.
It was called Delo Yulan, so Passionate Skin, and it's polemics now with the English words in it, but then it also talked about the skin of who we are today. And it actually came from an art critic who was talking about my work and other people's work at a show in Art Space, Sydney, and how they thought that our work was too polemical and political. And it's like, how can work be too political? Like, what does that mean? And I think that even, through my years, it doesn't happen that much anymore, but I think often I mean, very early on, people say, "Okay, so is your work about gay rights or is it about Aboriginal rights?" It's like, whoa, what do you mean by that? Like, they're always like pigeonholing like this, and so that work that I made was kind of a reflection on that, and I think that language is really powerful because it's secret. If you know, it's secret to us. Not secret, that's what I'm talking about, but it's like Jilawar, like not many people know, and it's kind of world around now. Most black fellas know it, but it's just I think that language is really powerful because it's a site of resistance, but it's a site of culture living on, and I think that the way in which it combines with English words can be really interesting too, because it kind of shifts perception that people have. But it speaks to land and connection to culture, like your work does. It comes very much from that.
Yes, in that exhibition I only had small bags, but the main thing is I was near you and your neon light lit my work up, so thank you again for that, Brooke. Oh yes, I've done well.
So
I've done well.
Those bags.
They were small, they did need some neon light.
Why were they so small?
Well, so the person at National Gallery Victoria wanted a sample of my work, and at the time it was the Iraq-Iran war, and I didn't want a couple of old girls that were taking my work to Melbourne for me, because I was home with children. And I thought, oh, I didn't want them having big works with barbed wire handles, you know, on a tram, for example. That'd be a bit awkward, bringing attention unnecessarily to them. So I decided I'd make little ones so they could hide them in bags. So there's no rocket science going on there, yeah. But in 2010, do you want to talk more about 2007?
Yeah, well, I'm just kind of thinking about DIWIL and the collection, because we're talking about language and the kind of these experiences that we have. We were all talking about it yesterday too, about museums and cultural objects and the kind of vast amount of collections overseas, and a lot of Aboriginal artists talk about this in our practice, and I think it's really important to talk about it and the visibility of that.
Yes, it is for us. It even works in museums, having to see. My first experience was in South Australia. Went to a museum, and I was just killing a bit of time and fell into this place, and I realised, oh, I'm in a museum, and looking at things, and of all the things I was interested in was a narcotic plant. I was studying, there's no course of study, I was teaching myself, borrowing and almost stealing, or maybe stealing some things to do these kind of things, and so that's what caught my attention. They had a sample of a narcotic plant called pitchery, and I put the lady to a lot of trouble trying to get some information from her. She was very suspicious of me, by the way, and she said, just come out the back room. She just wanted to usher me out the way because more people were coming in. I suppose I'm asking about drugs. You want to meet in the back room. And when I went into the back room, astoundingly, there was a big picture of my mum's brother. And I said to her, hang on, forget about the drugs. What's that doing here?
Yeah.
She said, oh, this. And I said, that's my mum's brother. She said, are you sure? I said, I reckon I am. Can I have it? She said, absolutely not. I said, well, I'm out of here. So I went home and told Mum. Mum said, what, have they got pictures of my brother in those? So anyway, I had not had great experiences, by the way, of these things, and I think that's why our work, a non-Aboriginal boss was studying Aboriginal affairs, and he was getting me, at 19, to check his essays. Like, it was astounding, and then to learn crazy things about a place up the road from us to do with, the famous Beveridge family. I'm talking about Swan Hill, Victoria, but how you learn about skulls placed on posts to line a driveway. I didn't need all that stuff, mean stuff, My boss didn't know too good about, doing that kind of stuff. But and we'd end up in museums. We'd end up down the back in dusty old boxes looking for stuff. Rather than have lunch, we would travel together. So instead of having lunch, we would go scavenging for information to make his essays look really good. But I started to see all these things, and I was very frustrated how our items, our tools and implements are so tucked away and gathering dust. And so a little bit of me being boundless is about shoving that out there and saying, if we can't get it out and do the right thing with it, or we can't have it back for us to have it perhaps, I'm shoving it in your face that, no, that's actually not a bowl. This time it's actually, sorry, that's not a canoe. This time it's actually a bowl. I'm out of hand. But we're trying to respond to that kind of thing. And talking about political, when somebody said to me, oh, you're political, I said, oh, how's that? Oh, well, you're an artist now, and that's political. I said, our lives are already political. They're certainly black and white. If someone had told me that, I think I would have left it just alone.
Well, I think our existence is political, right? Because
yes.
It gets to the fact that it's around land and ownership of land and contested land and the continual fight for visibility. And I think the problem with museums is that when they own that, like that photo of your brother, they think that they own
mum's brother,
bodies.
Yes.
Yeah, uncle. They they think that, and this perpetual psychological obsession of power is really problematic. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, which is really interesting. I mean, Tristan has kind of done a lot of stuff around memorials, and there's a lot of really interesting work happening here in this room, and that's kind of other Australians may not understand, the kind of the heaviness of the representations out there, and I think that not only artists but writers. I mean, kind of interdisciplinary, cultural, creative people are making more and more visible these sort of things, these practices. And I think collaboration is really important. The way in which that we connect with other people is really important. And I think in many ways, like this work for me is really personal. Like my grandmother gave me GARRU when I was young, which is the magpie, because for many reasons, but she's not with us anymore. But so for me, like GARRU NGAJUU NGAAY, like like I see the magpie, because my grandmother would always say, "Oh, when I see the magpie, I know it's you. You're here looking after me, looking over me." But it's a way in which she can connect. So for me, I mean, like being in this place, it's a very kind of emotional space for me, because it's not often you're surrounded so intensely by it, and other people may or may not have that experience. But for me, it's really like you don't often get an opportunity to do something like this. I want to thank Michael and the whole, museum for the opportunity to work in this kind of space and to connect with everyone here. Because often museums or galleries can be quite, I don't know, you can't touch this, or you can't do it that way. Say it. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I went back home after our dinner last night, and I was giving a talk about Nidan, the Biennale, the last Biennale of Sydney, to these kind of archaeology and anthropology students in Oxford. And I was kind of and one of the questions was, well, how is it that contemporary artists can work within museum spaces? And it's like, well, that's not the question. The question is, what will the museums and the power of that institute allow artists or Indigenous or other people to do? Because people say, I want you in this space, but they don't actually let you be in this space.
Yeah.
Like really let you be in this space.
Yes, because normally your wall is your work is normally up and down a wall, as we did here for the reopening, going from our old Albury Art Gallery to our new Murray Art Museum. So in the foyer, up and down, but here it is really wrapping round you, isn't it? Like a bit like Grandma wrapping round you, isn't it? It's quite intense.
I think it's also about joy. I mean, I think there is so much trauma and pain. Like we have to feel joy and we have to feel happiness, and I think that is really important.
Yeah, well, just making work is really burdening, isn't it? It's just a heavy thing making work. Although I'm not too sure about the physical for you. You seem to have a team to help you. Whereas
I got pictures sent to me.
Yeah, I'm going to get you to come and help me wrap some barbed wire. Well, see, there you go. But that's another story. But yeah, it can be quite burdening, isn't it? Just making the work and then trying to come and deal with that, all the obsession that you go through, the deadline that you have, and then you're expected to rock up and be happy about the whole darn thing at the opening and embrace it and take it in from a whole scale of really easy and loving, like Grandma, to another whole extreme, the whole political thing of it. So it's quite, and people come up to you very polite, and you think half the time you're not even in the space. It's crazy stuff, just an opening night to deal with, for example. But we know you've had more than enough of those, haven't you? Yes, we do know that. I know that from reading about you. Let's kind of go to back to 2010, with the Sydney Biennale. So I did a lovely work.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I did a lovely work, just pay homage to my pop. So using drain pipes. I'm really interested in materials that have had water in them, over them, around them, that kind of thing. So I found a whole big heap of rusty old drain pipes at a old
I love the way you use all that. Why do you use all that? Like, what is it about the rust? Is it because it's the colour as well, or what is it about that kind of?
Yes, well, my dad introduced me to these materials, but we would go out scavenge old dumps to look for things that had to fix things. Because he was a farmer that knew how to use these materials. They're all dumped down the back. He's actually the spare parts department, because you didn't have a Bunnings or a Mitre 10 to run to. And thank goodness they had the skills and knew what to do with things. So that's my dad introducing me to those and finding those materials quite pleasing. And he tried to teach me about the rust, and I wasn't quite convinced about that. And
what do you mean?
Well, frustratingly, my dad even got some ochre for me to put on the work. And so my very first work is using ochre, which is something I didn't want to do, and Mum was up in arms about it, and anyway, that's not the kind of story. But I wasn't confident about it, and there was only that one work I made, and then when I washed the ochre off a second piece, I started, just not comfortable. When I washed it off, I realised how exciting the patina rust was, and was quite astounded I wouldn't have to be uncomfortable trying to work out the use of ochre. And of course, down the track you realise what people have gone through to earn it to use ochre. So I'm certainly glad I'm not touching that.
But it's interesting because it's about the detritus, isn't it? It's about kind of what's left around and what you collect. I mean, I collect things too. We'll talk about Tony Albert actually, and Destiny and others who kind of collect things regardless if they're kitsch or not. But it's about that collecting and how you transform that into something else.
Tony, isn't it? Tony, I was telling Tony, I see different things around different places, and the idea is like to collect them and get them out of circulation because many of them are quite offensive. It could be an ashtray, a stand with an ashtray on it, and the idea is that you get to butt your cigarette out into the face of an Aboriginal child that's painted on that. So trying to collect them out and then unload them to Tony Albert to deal with. That's good to be able to do that. So so for that 2000 Biennale, I did make a cloak to pay homage to my pop to do with Brungle Station near Gundagai. Would you share about the work that you put in the exhibition?
Yeah, sure. And it was also one for 2018 as well, which was working with different artists.
Yeah, we'll talk about
collections too. No, so the work was a war memorial that I wanted to, because there were no memorials to the frontier wars. And so I wanted to create a space that was, a lot of Aboriginal people and other people put in circuses too, in this kind of whole freak show. And so this, there are very few, really important artists have made work, Aboriginal artists have made work to the frontier wars. And Julia Goff, Fiona Foley, a few others, but really powerful work.
Yes, powerful work.
John Mundine, of course, worked with the Remingini mob, wasn't it? To do, the 200 memorial, and that was really important. So it was important to kind of look at the kind of pretend recognition, or the not recognising the kind of frontier wars and the trauma that comes with all of that. And so it was about, that's when I started working with inflatables. It was like something that it's there for a moment, and even like Marcia was talking about the voice, to Parliament, but also when ATSIC was shut down, like all these things that the government kind of uses or has a flash in the moment for Aboriginal rights and recognition, but then it's not there again. And so for me, the kind of inflatables like that, it's there for a moment and then it's not there. And that was really important. That was very much inspired by the war memorials of Eastern Europe, so the fascist kind of style memorials. And that was, I went to Auschwitz and Birkenau, the kind of Jewish Holocaust sites, and other sites in Eastern Europe. And I know that Ioannis Scarce is also very much inspired by that as well. And we've had yarns about it. So that was something that... And it was really interesting, actually, because some people, like when the opening was happening, one person was kicking their shoes off, and this other person came up and said, "Oh, you're jumping on genocide."
Wow.
So it was something that I think we need to talk about more. Yeah.
Absolutely. So 2018, talking about Frontier Wars, we were in an exhibition called Colony, Frontier Wars Together.
Oh God, you're good, aren't you? I don't know all of this. I can't remember.
I'm just trying to highlight me in your career, as you can see.
So funny.
Pretty good, eh? So I wanted to... I have a nice big bar.
I can't even remember what I put in Colony.
Yeah, they're beautiful big, like a whole series of like portraits, but they had like this beautiful texture on the front, like wax or something. That's what I wanted to ask you about, what that was.
Oh, yeah.
Can you... Well, I put in Blackfella Road, another
That's
cloak,
right,
but all the barbed wire work. But let's talk, because I'm going to have one of these another time, talk about me. So let's hear about your work. I was just thinking
That
that the
starts in
boss.
5
that's
minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
We can swap it. We should
No,
have
no,
done
no,
that,
no, no,
actually.
no. We want to hear about your work. Let's go.
Well, just growing up with a lot of old family photos and everything, and wanting to understand why it is that my father's side of the family, the Celtic side, is all kind of out there.
We've all got one of
And
them.
yeah. And of course our mum's side of the family was not so much. But of course they didn't grow up, like Nan and Mum generation didn't even know about the human remains or the ethnographic photos and the museums and stuff like that. And so it was even a shock for me and my generation, but now they're all in museum displays and families are, accessing them a lot more now, which is really great. But for back then, I think it was in year 2000 or something that I made that work. It was very much about, again, what's there and then what's not there. And so I wanted to create a surface where when you shifted, it disappeared. So it just looked like a black canvas or a grey, silvery canvas, and you couldn't see it.
It's very astounding.
And then when you look at it again, then it just flashes like a dream. And I think that that's a good thing and a bad thing.
Even walking past it changed as you walk past it.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So these
They're almost as
portraits.
good as mine, but let's get over that. Let's move on from that. Yeah. So,
So I mean, I think that that's something that even like in here, people may or may not understand the language, but they can of course read about it here, or they might have a relationship to it or not. And so I'm very interested in what it is, the revival and retrieval and the living of culture and being within it. But often you're struggling against it in the kind of dominant society.